Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Travis Weller and serving Phi Beta Mu International as the chair of the Educational Outreach Committee. Joining me today is Professor of Bassoon and Director of Adult and Community Bands at Indiana University of Pennsylvania and coffee connoisseur, Dr. Jason Worzbyt. Jason,
Nice to be with you, Travis.
yeah, thanks for hopping on with me for a series of discussions that just engaging our educational outreach members and talking about a host of things. And one of the things that came up in our recent conversations was getting passion back into our teaching. And I believe you phrased it as teaching with your pants on fire. Where do we start? And let's start with the profession at large. I go out for clinics. I do runouts with directors. I know you do the same. Where do we start, and how do we get that passion back in our teaching?
Well, I mean, and we could go in a couple different directions. Like, why don't we talk about ourselves? We could even start with that. For me, I think I'm often reminded that the things that are most important to us and that we're passionate about, we have to continue to nurture. And I think about, like, with my spouse, some of the best advice I ever got when I got married was, don't forget to keep dating your spouse. Because that's how you continue to fall in love with your spouse all over again. And I think it's the same thing when you practice a musical instrument. You have to, if you don't stay connected to an instrument, then I think then that becomes difficult. I think the same thing is with our teaching, is that we have to continue to be connected to the art form. And for me, one of the ways that I do it is I try to find ways to stay connected to music that aren't even necessarily reflected in my teaching or related to my teaching. For me, I'm very lucky that I have this as my constant companion.
Right.
And so I'm
Right.
able to do, so that's one of the things that I do, is that when I do get a chance to play, I really enjoy playing, because it reminds me why I got into this business in the first place. And I think one of the things that happens to all of us over time, as we do something intently and intensely, as we do it, we get further and further away from that music major that was in the building at 11 p.m., midnight, still practicing and still enjoying that. We get further and further away from it. And I think that happens to all of us in the profession at one time or another, is that we get so far away from that, we forgot why we got into this business in the first place. And so for me, kind of reminding myself how powerful music is, at least from the bassoonist point of view, that for me is helpful. Going out and doing a clinic, it reminds me, just meeting new people and getting to share with them. That also reminds me, because it reminds me of the teachers that I had. So I think as much as we can stay connected to the art form in some way or another, even outside of our teaching, finding another dimension to it. And that could be volunteering, that could be composing, that could be conducting a community, whatever, finding something even outside of our professional space. That's my life preserver. That's my oxygen tank, to be honest.
And it's interesting how you talked about that. And I was just having this discussion in one of my methods courses here at Messiah with some students, and we were talking about how, like, our piano majors and guitar majors, they're very apt to just picking up the instrument all the time and making music almost recreationally, and which is good, which is great, but we don't always think about that, like, as wind instruments and percussionists. We don't always think about ourselves as like this solo musician. And I know over the last few years of my teaching in public schools, I got more in the habit of, you know what, I am going to lead this rehearsal today with my tuba, and I'm just going to be the role model in the room. And there are so many responsibilities that are heaped upon us directors on a daily basis. And having my wife still be in the public schools and talking to her about what she does in a day's time, that list isn't going to get any shorter, you know.
No, no.
That's the unfortunate part. And so that idea of let me reconnect to the musician that's in me. It's not only good for you personally, but it's good for your students to see that, like, my director still cares about making music, even if they're playing into an empty rehearsal room. They're still playing. They're still doing those kind of things. I will never forget a quote from a Francis Macbeth, and I'm very thankful that I got to meet him and know him a little bit on several occasions. And he was so gracious with his time. And I remember him telling me, you know, the one time, and as a young music educator, he said, well, he said, never forget why you got into it. It was because of a love affair with sound. Like, no band director gets into a love affair of fruit sales. Like, they're convenient around the holiday times, but we got into it because we love sound. We love to manipulate it. We love to lead it. We love to shape it. We love to contribute to it. And so I think that's really important, you know, for all of us to remember, take time and nurture that musician.
Igor Stravinsky's got this great quote, and I'm going to paraphrase Stravinsky a little bit. You know, Stravinsky said, you know, in the schools and in academia, we are being taught to appreciate music. We should be taught to love it instead. And that came
Oh,
from Stravinsky,
that's
you
great.
know, who, you know, when you listen to some of his music, you don't necessarily get the warm and fuzzies from him. But that was his, but you know,
Well,
but that was his
from a certain
philosophy.
point of view, like you listen to
Right.
Right in Spring, that might be your jam, and it does give you a warm and fuzzy, and you know, you can understand why those people rioted all those years ago, right? So anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think the other thing is, as much as we can, to get around like-minded people that continue to be passionate, because I mean, I was taught many, many years ago. I still remember in my instrumental methods class in the really early 90s, how powerful modeling was as a teaching tool. And I think seeking those people out, whether to say, hey, can I watch your rehearsal, or see if you can go to the Pittsburgh Symphony when there's a really great guest conductor in town, and go there, or see a live concert, but to be around like-minded people and to absorb that energy and absorb their passion and watch their teaching. You know, I would rather go to a rehearsal of the New York Philharmonic than a concert. I would rather go to a rehearsal, particularly if a person like I mean, Dudamel is going to be there very soon. I would love to see Dudamel rehearse. And what does he say to the
Yeah,
New York Philharmonic to elicit a sound? You know, what does he say?
right.
You know, I think this is where I think, you know, and it's kind of like, I once had a colleague say, it's after work, it's always good to have designated ranting hours. Is I think what she said after work, you know, but finding like-minded people, and maybe do like an exchange with a rehearsal. I'll go at your watch rehearsal and I'll go and watch yours. Even just something like that, where we can be supportive of one another, because it's very easy. And I know you know this from your career. It is so easy to get isolated
Yeah.
when we teach what we teach. Here at a university, I'm not isolated because I've got colleagues. I can walk out into the hallway, I can see a colleague. But in a lot of school settings, particularly rural school settings, you might be it,
Yeah, and
and you feel like you're out on the island.
and that becomes a real issue, because the number of teachers over the years who have gone to an in-service clinic or professional development day that their district hosts, and they say, I got nothing out of it. And that concerns me, because like what you're talking about, just in that little instant, why can't there be more open exchange of, like, make contact with that director that you really admire 20 miles down the road, and on a day where you have a professional development day scheduled, and you know that he's going to be or she's going to be teaching that day, and they're going to be directing their bands and working with their kids, like, that opportunity to go and observe, to go and exchange ideas. It's one thing to go to a conference and hear everything in, this is a theory, this is what I've done, this, you know,
Right.
we look at the catalog, but like, I think I want to order that, but I won't know if it fits until I try it on. Well, it would be a lot easier if we could get school administration more receptive to the idea of, let me create my own professional development. And some school districts are good about that. A mutual friend that we have, Lance, I know
Oh, sure.
Lance has
Yeah.
been very aggressive about doing that and trying to learn from others. And I think it's really valuable. The other thing that you brought up, and I think it's so important, is to have that director's circle. Those five people that you can call, that you can bounce an idea off of. Those five people that will be straight with you. That if you send them a rehearsal recording and they're come back to you like, hey, your clarinets need to work on the throat tones. Like, number one, you can take it with like the sincerity and I want what's best for you. Are you hearing this? You improve this, fix this. Hey, this group is doing, this part of the band is doing really well, or things like that. And I think the other point you're bringing up there, having that group of people that you can, count on and you can reach out to, I think is another important piece of that puzzle of keeping that fire alive, because sometimes they challenge us a little bit and we're like, oh, I've gotten away from doing that. I better get back on the program, you know.
No, absolutely. I mean, it was so interesting, because when I taught here, or when I've been teaching here, one of my main musical mentors, Jack Stamp, was always here. I taught beside him for many, many years. And, he kind of he set me on the road towards conducting study. And even though we were colleagues, he would let me know if there was something that I needed to look at. And I appreciated it so much. And he didn't have to do that. He really didn't have to do that. I've also had that actually when I've been guest conducting sometimes. I will ask a teacher out in the audience, what do you hear? And they say, and I love folks that are honest with me.
Yeah.
I love folks that are honest with me, because it has never been about us to begin with. It's about the music and the kids. It's always about that. And that's a difficult thing to do. Especially I think with younger teachers, you talk about, well, I didn't get anything out of this. I didn't get anything out of that. I think some teachers are afraid to admit that they don't know everything.
Ooh, really?
And how could you? A modern music education degree is the equivalent of putting 90 pounds of potatoes into a 10-pound bag. There is absolutely no way, even in the best of situations, that we as teachers can prepare you for everything that you are going to see.
That's the disclaimer that I give my methods courses. Like, we'll talk through something. We'll have a class discussion. We'll talk about what research is saying. We'll talk about what their experiences are. And I said, now listen, I said, at some point, 5 years from now, you're going to be on your first job, your first gig, and you're going to encounter something, and you're going to be like, you know what, Dr. Weller didn't prepare me for this. And you can go ahead and call me, and I'll put the phone down and put it on speaker, and I'll just let you yell at me, because I know that we can't possibly cover everything. But if we can have those connections and colleagues that are honest with us, like Jack was for you, I'm fortunate here. I've got two people that look over my shoulder from time to time, and I can ask them, well, what did you hear? What did you think about that? And I always learn something when I go into Jim Colonna's wind ensemble rehearsal. The week of concerts, I make a point to go in every day and just watch what's going on and listen to how the band is responding. And I think it's such a valuable exercise and endeavor that we can have those conversations, and we can sometimes meet the truth head on, which, let's be honest, that's difficult for anybody sometimes. Um,
It is.
so. Um, so
Absolutely.
how about, like, so let's talk about this next generation that's
Mhm.
coming up, and how do we make sure that they come out of the gates with fire? And as you've worked with some of the student teachers over the last couple of years, what are the things that you are finding work really well and are helpful to them?
I think showing the students who you are and not creating this facade that you're trying to act behind. Because there's this concern, I think, with young teachers that if I show them who I am, that they're just going to walk all over me. And I don't think that that's not the case. You can show up because, I mean, this is cliche, but your students, our students that we teach could care less that we know how to spell a German sixth chord. They could care less that we know what the interval of transposition is for E flat clarinet. And they really could care less that we know the 3 stylistic periods of Stravinsky. But they want to know that we care about them.
Yeah.
That's what they want. And it's not one or the other. I mean, it really isn't, because I think the shortest distance between two people is a smile and being kind. And you can still be kind, but have class control and have standards and all of that. We are in the people building business, and music is the tool that we are using. We are trying to communicate from a place inside us to a place inside them. And until we access this, we have to be able to access, because you can't give away what you don't have.
Right.
We have to access this in some way. And you can show your students who you are, and you can be human and you can be vulnerable, but you can still have a standard. And I think with young kids, or with younger teachers, I think that's a struggle. Part of it is the generation that they're growing up in, because how do they communicate?
Right.
They're texting, and not much of it is visual or verbal.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a product of the times that we're living in.
The idea of, and this is something I talk to my methods course kids about: be firm, be fair, be friendly. You're not their friend, but be friendly, and just being able to understand that music is a very human experience. To make music is a human endeavor. It's a human experience. And the idea that, we're going to get perfection out of imperfect people is a little bit laughable. And we also have to remember that we ourselves are not perfect people. We can try and we can prepare, but we can't all be trumpet players. So that's a joke. I'm a
Yeah,
tuba,
right.
you're a bassoon, and we both know that, like,
Right.
there's nothing funnier than a trumpet player whose name is Chip, right?
Right.
But the idea that, we are going to have moments where our ability to be empathetic and our ability to be vulnerable and show students, this is who we are, this is where we are at in life, and I am going to meet you where you are in life, and I'm going to help lead you forward. And getting that next generation to understand that, hey, that's sort of part of the deal, because I want to see the best version of yourself teach music. I don't want to see somebody who's exactly like me, your methods teacher. I want to see you, and I want to see you as that best version.
Be yourself, because everyone else is taken.
Yeah, that is such a great great way to put it.
And it's James Jordan talks a lot about this in The Musician's Soul, which is like, that book changed my life when I got it. I don't know how many years ago when it came out, but he talks about, he feels like he does his best teaching when he finds his own vulnerability within himself.
Okay.
And he feels like then when he is at that spot, it's much easier for him to relate to his students. And as well as I do that, and I didn't come up with this quote, but there are children that we are going to teach that are going to ask for love in the most unloving way. And it's going to happen. And I've seen this. I mean, I and you have too. And so we always have to remember what is the message that we're trying to communicate, because the minute that we inject ourselves into this, when we put our ego that, well, I'm going to be held responsible for how the band sounds. Well, yeah, I mean, there's a part of that that's true,
Sure.
but it's not, taking ourselves out of that equation is a very, very difficult thing because music is inherently, it's even more difficult, I think, for vocalists. With instrumentalists, or even maybe from a band perspective, I can put my bassoon away if I'm not having a good bassoon day, and I know that all rehearsals end at some point, and so I can put my score away, I can walk away, and if it wasn't great, I can come back for another day. Vocalists, I think, even have a harder time of this because the instrument is with them.
Sure.
It's difficult to separate ourselves from that, and think about how you and I came up kind of through the system to become a teacher. We started to have some success at music as young kids, and that really started. I mean, it did boost our self-confidence, but look, we all have an ego to a degree, and that gets fed. And what can happen as we get older is that we continue to feed this, and then like our ego starts to wrap around everything, and then when one little thing goes a kilter, then we
It's
find
hard.
ourselves in trouble.
It's hard to not take it personally because we
Bingo.
look back as like, I've made this huge investment in this. And like, it's that one kid. And I see this all the time in Facebook group discussions, like a kid wants to drop band and it's that key kid.
Mhm.
And you don't want to see the kid drop. You don't, because you know that you can see some things in that kid they can't really see right now. And as directors, like, yes, fight for that kid, fight for the potential to be there, but you have to understand that it's not everybody's destiny to like end there, and you can't take it so personally that it's an indictment of you that you have done something wrong. And I see that like in teaching, I see that in playing. We go through the process of preparing something, and I know you and I have talked about having this experience that the best performance happens 2 days before the concert in rehearsal. Like, and you have that moment of arrival, and everyone's like, yes, and now it's like, okay, I want to bottle that. We need to have that 2 nights from now. And so then we get to the concert and maybe everything's fine, but we know it wasn't what it was 2 days earlier. And again, we become very hard on ourselves, with that idea where we start to take it personally that, we've really done something terrible, and it can be frustrating. And there's an ebb and flow to all of those things that you cannot let that get to you and bring you down as a young teacher, because ultimately it's just like taking a bucket of water and you just dump it right on your fire for teaching. And that doesn't need to happen. Just leave that bucket alone.
Art is messy and should be messy. I remind, well, no, I talk about with my students sometimes. It's like when you were in kindergarten and you were in art class, you put, I don't know whether they still do this or not. I put on a smock, I think is what they called it. Like I had an
Yeah.
old shirt,
Okay. Yeah.
and I would go and I would just, as a kindergartner, you just get paint all over the place. You get it all over your clothes and you get clay all over, and you have such a great time because you created this. And then what starts to happen after that, the older that we get away from that messiness, and we just try to make this, this perfect, sterile, representation of something. And I think we need to go back and remind ourselves that it's okay to be messy when you're working with art. I think that's okay. It should not be some type of sterile surgical theater. It should be a laboratory. Get a Bunsen burner and blow up some test tubes.
Well, I blew a colleague's mind this week because I referred to my composing as acoustic alchemy. Like, listen, I make a big mess. Some of it is with a Dixon Ticonderoga and a sketchbook, and some of it's these audio recordings on my phone, and like stuff that gets put into a notation software. And like, I'm okay with that. And there's times that within a rehearsal, and like we do something like, okay, well, that was all fine. Like, okay, we made the crescendo happen and nobody breathed at the end of the measure and we pushed all the energy, but there's something missing. Can we try something different? And we make those small, subtle adjustments. And maybe, those small, subtle adjustments aren't on the page. And listen, there's part of us that our passion, as artists, we should be able to hear some things in the music that maybe a composer themselves did not hear at the time of creation, and something really speaks to us, and we should be able to draw that out. And that involves getting messy because, number one, it's going to get, well, that's not what's printed. And yes, the ink matters, but this and this connecting and with something, some sort of element matters too, and we've got to get to that, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I really think what I tell students a lot is, I think that the number one indicator of a really good piece of music is that I can open up a score that I've maybe done 3, 4, 10 times, and I'm always finding something new. That there's always something, for most students, band is or choir, whatever, it's the only time during the day that they get to be creative. Other than that, it is replication. All they do all day is just replication. That's it. They want to get the right answer. And in my opinion, the number one thing that kills creativity is replication.
Well,
And that's what they get all day.
right.
That's what they get all day. So it's really hard for them not to. It's like, well, wait a minute, that's not on the page. That's not the right answer. You're right.
And like, if you think about like, and I don't mean to be critical of, somebody who's teaching freshman algebra or someone who is teaching 11th grade reading, language arts or literature or anything like that. But they know that if it's October, that we are factoring polynomials. I think that's a thing in math. I don't math much anymore. Uh,
I had just hurt when you said that, but
so sorry.
keep going. Yeah, right.
That is totally my fault. We don't think like that literature teacher knows that, like, okay, well, it's this grade level, then they're reading The Outsiders, and it's this grade level, then I'm reading, whatever. Music, like each and every year, and I think it was Jack, I remember talking about this and possibly writing about it, was, we get to pick our own Shakespeare. And so we get to involve everybody. And that's just something that should ignite passion in us in searching for great music that fits the needs of our students, where we can draw some of these things out of them. We can engage them in this conversation of, well, how do you think we can make this section better? And there's so many good choices that are out there that we can pull from. And I think that's one of the things we shouldn't lose sight of, that repertoire and those choices we make can be very, very exciting for us.
I think it was Bob Reynolds that had this line. He said that, and I'm going to paraphrase him. He said, when you pick a piece of music to do with your students, there's about 2,000 other pieces that you could have picked that you didn't. And can you justify picking that as opposed to all of these others? And it's a really great exercise, because if we can't do that, then we're not doing right by our students. And you're right. I mean, we've got the most literature than we probably have ever had to choose from, which is great. But it does take an investment of time to kind of pick through what's going to work for our students.
Yeah.
Craig Kirchhoff had another line too. I remember he would talk about, it's really important, or you can get the most out of your rehearsal time if you really, when you stop to rehearse, that the focus is all on expression. What are we trying to express?
Yeah.
And good music should give us that opportunity to be able to do that.
I mean, if we are not saying something through our music with some sort of emotion,
Mm-hmm.
are we studying music for the sake of its theoretical elements? Are we studying it for, we really wanted to help those students work on their, no. We want to say something. We want to express something. And I think that's such a critical part. that we should be mindful of. And I think we're living in a great time from the standpoint of there is music at all levels that you can create those kind of moments for your students. And I think some directors sometimes get frustrated. Well, we're never going to get to the point where we can play this. We're never going to get to the point that we can play this. But, there are some hidden gems that have been out there for years. And I know you've invested a lot of time, a lot of research in finding those pieces. And there's new works that are being created that we need to view some of those opportunities as maybe it's a stepping stone that gets us to uh, let's put some of the ultimate pieces up there. Like, this is the stepping stone that's going to get us to First Suite. This is the stepping stone that's going to get us to Posey, like the
Right.
path to Posey. Like, what are the things that you've got to
Ooh, I
do?
like that. The path to Posey. That's great.
Yeah, I'm
That's
not going to
great.
get it on a coffee mug, so you feel free to run with that one as
Well,
hard as you want.
it's interesting. I'm thinking about two things I'm thinking about is that, the nice thing about what we do and the unique thing about what we do is that, you do not need to be a yo-yo ma to get the benefits and all of the things that music does for us. You do not need to be a practitioner of that level. And I think maybe to the general public sometimes that there is some misunderstanding with that. You don't need to be an artist of that stature that we can get the benefits from it. The other thing I think about is that I think that we as teachers should be able to have an aesthetic experience from a 0.5 band piece, a 0.5 difficulty band piece. We should be able to have that aesthetic experience. It's possible because the music is out there. It's that, and that I think that is a topic I think we have suffered for years. It's like, well, if I can't conduct the Doll Sinfonietta, I'm not a true conductor. Or if I'm not going to get a chance to conduct, the Michael Colgrass Winds of Nagual, then my career is not worth it. Well, and that's just not true. That's just not true. I know music that is written for elementary band that is just as well crafted as those masterpieces. Just as well crafted, but appropriate for younger musicians. Yeah. And that's what, because I think younger teachers sometimes think, well, if I'm not conducting this level music, I'm not a real teacher. And it's such a shame. Yeah. It's such a shame because we really shouldn't stratify the profession like that.
It's learning to embrace where you are, where your students are, taking into account how they grow through the process. Because keep in mind that as we work on music, sometimes that music, it's reciprocating. It works on us. It changes our mindset. It changes how we listen to things. It changes what we appreciate. It changes how we view when we put work into things, how much better things can get. And the bonus comes that whenever we find sounds that excite us and get us energized. And I've had some great opportunities to conduct some upper level groups at the university level with high school honor bands and things of that nature. But you know what? I've had some really awesome experiences connecting with elementary kids, and you feel their energy and how proud they are of what they have been able to do. And we've learned this, and we're doing these things, and we're being expressive, and we're putting ourselves, and we're identifying with that music. And I think that's a really important part of you need to embrace those things so that you don't lose sight of how far you've come, and you don't unintentionally throw a bucket of water on your own fire because this didn't happen for you, or you view yourself as somehow unimportant to a 4 through 12 instrumental program because you happen to be the person who does 5th and 6th grade band. And that's just not the case at all. And hopefully there's vertical conversations that are happening between all those band directors. And I
Mhm.
think that's an
Mhm.
important part of like cheering each other on, putting your ego aside, putting your arm around your colleagues and encouraging them. I tell
Right.
people all the time that that's my favorite word in the English language, encourage. Giving somebody else the courage to do something maybe they didn't think they had the ability to do. And I think
Absolutely.
that's an important part.
Oh yeah. Well, and the other thing is, sometimes, and I'm sure you've had this experience too. You're working with an honor band, and someone asks you, "What's your favorite piece on the program?"
Mm,
And invariably, when I get asked that question, I say every single one, because I don't conduct. And I know you think like this exactly. We don't conduct music that we don't believe in.
right.
We don't conduct music that we don't believe in. I can think of some masterworks out there that I revere, that I would be a horrible proponent of. As an example, the Schoenberg theme and variations is a masterwork. It is a masterwork. There's no doubt about it. I would not be the best proponent of that piece. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Now, Copeland emblems? Yes, I would.
Right.
Yes, I would. That music speaks to me. But what I would do is, if I had a group that could play the Schoenberg, number one, they need to play it. But number two, I'm going to find someone that would do that. It's like, okay, here's the person that's going to light your pants on fire. That's going to light your pants on fire about this piece, because we can't be everything to everyone. Even Leonard Slacken was on our campus
Oh, right.
last year,
Right.
and he even talked about, as a conductor, when you're joining or when you're creating your repertoire, you can't be kind of a person for all seasons and all people. There's a core repertoire that you want to do, which you feel good about, that you feel confident of. And so, if a piece like the Sherbet theme variations, if that doesn't speak to you, and that's okay, that's fine. There are a lot of other folks that would do that
Yeah.
piece.
Right.
And I think that's okay. We can't be all things to all people and to all music.
And it's such a fair way to look a fair way to look at our role. Knowing that from time to time we need help building a fire, we need help stoking a fire. Getting back to what we talked about at the very beginning, that idea that our circle of mentors, our circle of people that we rely on, that we count on, such an important part of making sure the fires stay lit. So.
Well, and teachers, teachers need to be mentored. I'm not talking about the student teaching process. I'm talking about the first several years in the profession. They really need to be mentored. And if there's not a mentoring process, where they are, some places do have them, some don't. Find a mentor. It's so important, because it really my father is a professor. He's a retired professor of guidance counseling, and he would often say this to me growing up. We don't When we are living life, we're not living life as it is. We're living life as we perceive it to be. And so sometimes we may be in a situation where we perceive that we're not doing very well. Whereas for where we are in our career path, we're actually doing quite well, or better, at least that we think. And so that's where I think having a mentor that is willing to come and listen and listen and watch and provide feedback, especially in those early years, because that's where a lot of these folks make the decision that, okay, I think I can make this as a career, or this isn't for me. And they scatter. And so that's where that mentoring is so, so important. And I think it's important to seek it out if it's not immediately available. It's the same thing for college teachers too. We need to be mentored. We do.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is,
Absolutely.
we really, really need to be mentoring. And you see, there's a spot where you can kind of get your pants on fire. Maybe there's a young teacher that's out there that maybe you might get to know. It's like, well, would you mind if I did this? Or, what do you think about, that's an opportunity for us to keep our fire lit. For me, I think the spirit of volunteerism is such a big thing, or acts of service that we do on behalf of the profession, not on behalf of our program or our school district or university, whatever, but serving the profession. serving the profession and volunteering, I think is such a great thing to build us up, because someone did it for us. People did it for us.
You know, that's
We didn't come out of the womb knowing how to do this, you know.
no, no. And you think about the mentors that you've had that have invested in you.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yes.
so like
Yes.
that idea of just paying that forward to somebody else, and even to somebody that you maybe don't know well, but is in your area, is in your region, and you know that they maybe need someone, in their life, in, just helping them along. And I think it's such a critical thing to help somebody, along that path.
Mhm. You
Jason,
just said the three magic words, pay it forward. That is what teaching is.
yeah.
It's all about, it's all paying it forward. Those are that's it. You just said it. Those are the three magic words.
Awesome. Jason, if any of the members of Phi Beta Mu International want to get in touch with you to talk more about this idea, where can they reach you?
I'm very easy to find on the IUP website. My email address is readtip@iup.edu. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
Fantastic. Jason, thanks again so much. Thank you for your continued work on the Educational Outreach Committee. To all of our brothers and sisters in Phi Beta Mu International, on behalf of Jason and I, we wish you well, life, love, and music, and hope to see many of you over the next couple of months, hopefully at the Midwest Clinic in Chicago for the international meeting.